Hello, welcome to A Stitch in Time. Today is Thursday, October 4th, 2018, and this is episode 75. My name is Carol. I'm known as Knits and Pearls on Ravelry. Show notes for this and every episode can be found on the blog and also in the episode thread in the Ravelry group. If you'd like to get in touch, you can do so via private message on Ravelry, by leaving a comment on YouTube, or by leaving a comment in the group, and I'll get back to you at some point, usually within a few days. Hi everyone, thanks for joining me today. It is a lovely, sunny, not a cloud in the sky day here in the Fraser Valley of British Columbia, Canada, just a little bit east of Vancouver. It's a welcome change after quite a bit of rain, especially over the weekend and earlier this week, and some cold winds for the last couple of days. And there's a first dusting of snow on our mountains, which accounts for the cold winds. We can always feel when there's snow on the mountains. The valley just gets definitely a little bite in the air. But it is beautiful now that the clouds have disappeared and you can see the blue sky and the beautiful mountains. Where my mom lives, they've had snow this past week, quite a bit. I think the other day, I think it was Wednesday, she said, or Tuesday, she had like 8 inches. So they think they kind of went from summer right to winter. There wasn't much of a fall. Some of my family is going up this coming weekend to close up the cabins, and there's even a threat of a little bit of snow on Sunday, although it's supposed to be nice the day before that, which is I think when they're going to be draining pipes and starting to shut most things down. We will not be going. We are leaving for holidays next Saturday, and so we have things to do before that, including celebrating Thanksgiving with our children and grandchildren on Sunday. Thanksgiving's actually on Monday, but it makes more sense to do it on Sundays. The kids don't have to worry about getting the kids. I'm sure they're not worried. They don't have to worry about getting the kids in bed in time for school the next day. So there's a little glimpse of what's coming up. I went to Knit City last weekend and it was really great. And I filmed a little recap on Monday, and I thought about putting it at the end of the podcast, how I usually do sort of all the extras in case people don't want to see. But then it occurred to me there's some knitting I'm doing that with yarn that I bought there, and I thought it might make more sense to sort of see things in terms of chronological order. So I'm going to insert that little recap here, and I will use a little Knit City placeholder to start it and end it. So if you're scrolling ahead, just watch for that, and then come back for the regular podcast. So I'll see you on the other side. It's the day after Knit City, and while I'm still feeling the effects of the yarn fumes, and I still have the events of yesterday fresh in my mind, I thought it would be a good time to sit down and record this recap of my experiences there. I attended with my daughter Jess. We got to meet one of the podcast viewers that was visiting from out of town. We unexpectedly ran into some people we knew there. We did brush shoulders with a couple of knitting celebrities, and of course we shopped the marketplace and came home with some lovely yarny goodness. I did take my camera, but it stayed in my bag most of the day, and I didn't take it out till near the end to take some pictures of ourselves, and then I did walk around and take pictures of some of the booths, and I'll kind of insert them throughout this as they are pertinent. Honestly, I am somewhat shy and didn't feel comfortable asking some of the more well-known people in the knitting community to take their picture, and I didn't feel right about snapping a photo. And so Sorry for those who've tuned in hoping for that. I don't have that, but hopefully you'll enjoy hearing about our encounters. So I picked Jess up at her place about 8 o'clock in the morning, and we hit the highway. It was not a very nice drive in. It poured rain all day yesterday, and unfortunately our visitors from out of town will have gotten a really good idea of what Vancouverites experience during the fall and winter months, or often do anyway. So yeah, I think by the time we parked and came in the doors, it was about 9:30. And the first place that we went to was Black Cat Custom Yarn. They are our local yarn shop, and they had a booth there. And Jess is friends with the owner and had arranged to bring her some change. So we stopped there, dropped that off, and had a little visit with them before we decided to do a walk around. So a little while after we started looking through all the booths, we came across the Pom Pom booth, Pom Pom Quarterly, and there was a lineup, and realized that Joji Locatelli and Vera Valimaki were there signing books. That was kind of neat to see them for real. I've seen them before in pictures and on video, but not in the flesh. And so yeah, we didn't stay there too long. We kind of moved on past the crowd that was there, carried on our way. I think Jessica bought something soon after that. I was trying to resist buying anything until after our first walk around. So I did go into, I spotted a couple of skeins in, what was it called? Flock Fiber Studio. And when I expressed that I was trying to resist until I'd finished seeing everything, the owner kindly offered to put the skeins away for me to come back for later, which I did. So it was really nice of her. So I think by the time we did our first go round, it was getting close to 11 o'clock. And that's the time that I'd arranged to meet with Susan. She's SCC on Ravelry. She's a podcast viewer and a member of our group. And she's in Vancouver right now visiting her son. So it was great because I've seen her picture on some of her project pages, so I had a pretty good idea of who to look for, and of course she knew who I was, so we had no trouble at all spotting each other, and she hung out with us for the rest of her time there. She left about, I think, 45 minutes earlier than we did, but she'd been lucky enough to be there the day before, so she had already experienced everything, gone and had the chance to look at all the yarn and such. So it was really cool to meet up with Susan in person. We've been messaging back and forth on Ravelry for quite some time. So once again, Susan, it was so great to meet you. Really helped to make my experience. So as one booth that I really wanted to stop at was Gage Dye Works, and so we did make our way there, and Jess spotted a friend of hers that was working in the booth, so that was really cool. And they had been online friends through they were part of a group for I think it was the Robert Jordan books. And it turned out I'd actually met Lisa before too. I hadn't remembered her, but she had come to my grandson's baby shower. That was like almost 8 years ago. So they were pleasantly surprised to see each other and kind of renew their acquaintance. And then as we were looking at the various yarns, Jess said, "Mom, look behind you." And I turned around, and it was Stephanie Pearl McPhee, the yarn harlot. And Jess was particularly excited to see her. She had, I'd introduced her to her blog quite a while ago when she was living away from home and going through some rough times, and just starting to knit really back then. And she actually went up to Stephanie and told her how much she had enjoyed still enjoys her blogs, but how much her blog had meant to her back then and helped her through some tough times. So it was very nice to speak to her for a few minutes. I know Jess especially was really excited to have the chance to meet her, talk to her. So I went with the intention of buying some yarn for a shawl, and I picked up this skein of fingering, MCN fingering, in the April Showers colorway. They had lots of shawl samples knit up, so it was really nice to be able to see how the striping looked when it was knit up and how the colors played with each other. So that was my first purchase. Oh, and it even came with the bag. Oh, it's over there. I can't reach it. Anyway, that was skein number 1, and then there was no stopping me. Well, that's not quite true. I actually didn't do too badly. I went with basically 3 intentions. One was to visit Gage. The other was to visit Yarn Inc. And the third thing was to shop for yarn for a shawl. And I had been watching the Suburban Stitcher podcast, and she was working on a shawl called, I always forget the name of it, Time Trades by Caitlin Hunter or Boyland Knits. And when I saw that shawl and then looked at the pattern, I decided I wanted to pick up yarn for that project. So on our initial walk around, I had been keeping my eye out for mini skeins because the pattern calls for 5 mini skeins of a gradient and then 2 full-size skeins of fingering to go with. And I hadn't seen anything on my first walk around, but on the second time round, we went to the Mid-Knit Cravings Yarn Company booth. Now, I'm assuming it's spelled mid-knit. I know it's a play on midnight, or at least that's my impression. I hadn't heard of them before, but then as I was speaking to one of the owners, I learned probably a lot of you have heard of her. She's Creations on a Whim on Ravelry, and she has the Purl Up and Dye podcast. So I am going to check her out. She was very pleasant to deal with. So these are the mini skeins. As soon as I saw them, I knew that was going to be it, and I have just enough. I think I need 94 to 110 grams, or yards, in each skein, and I think there's like 96 in each of these. I don't know if you can tell, this is a dark plum color. It's actually called Velvet Plum. So then I looked at a few different skeins, and I came up with, sorry, just trying to grab them, with these 2 to go with them. So this, as you can see, is kind of a tonal purple, and it's called Amethyst Brooch, and it is a they had a whole line of Anne of Green Gables yarns, and they were sock yarns, and they had various characters, yarns dyed for various characters, and then they had yarns that were dyed with particular items or themes in mind. So this one called Amethyst Brooch, and it goes with the Marilla colorway, which was a sort of a multi-tonal, or a variegated yarn with shades of this in it. They had Diana, and her matching yarn was Puffy Sleeve, so you kind of get the idea. So anyway, I don't think any of these ones are, no, none of these are Anne of Green Gables yarns. Anyway, so I've got this tonal plummy amethyst color to go with this. And then I also got this skein of a variegated yarn. It's called Solomon's Robe, and it just seemed to have a lot of these same colors in there. I don't know if you can tell. It's still pouring rain today, so the light's not fantastic, but it's the best I can do. So anyway, so yeah, those are the, these are going to be my, again, Time Trades shawl. I don't know why I'm having such a tough time remembering that name. And I am itching to cast it on, so that's another reason I wanted to record this today so that I can then wind these up and get going on them. I think this is definitely my favorite purchase of the day, the one I'm most excited about. Then we made our way around and we came across a booth called Wool Is Not Enough, and they carried Fleece Artist and Handmaiden yarns. And what drew us in were skeins from the National Parks collection that Fleece Artist had dyed up to commemorate Canada's 150th birthday last year. And then we proceeded to move on to other yarns. They had a couple of sample shawls knit up that combined a singles yarn and a matching mohair yarn. So we found we were guided towards these sets. It is Fleece Artist Merino Slim and then Handmaiden Angel Hair. These are the new Handmaiden labels in case you haven't seen them yet. And the skeins were dyed to match. So I'll actually take this apart and show you there are two skeins in here. And as you can see, they've been dyed to go with each other. And so both Susan and I bought one of these. She bought one that was more of a denim blue, and then I got this one. As you can see, it's kind of the woman working there thought it might be the ocean colorway, but she wasn't positive. They're not labeled with their colorways. It was a tough decision because they had a peacock one and it had a shawl knit up in the peacock colorway. And then there was another one I was looking at called, I think it was Nebula, something like that. But in the end, I settled on this one. So again, kind of excited to try my hand at this. I'm not sure which pattern I'm going to use yet. There was a woman there, a designer, she's working the booth. Her name's Rebecca Ward, and she has company is Knit One T1, and she told me about a shawl pattern called the Wild One that she had knit. So that was one of the samples, and then she was wearing another scarf shawl knit out of this that she said she's hasn't released the pattern for yet. So. And then one of the other samples was Swerve, which I knit this past year. And so I already have that pattern, and it looked really nice in this combination. So I'm not really sure what pattern I'm going to knit yet, but I definitely have some options. I think more simple is the way to go. Actually, a feather and fan might even complement that yarn too with and help the colors distribute, look really nice. So that's an up in the air as far as projects go. One of the booths that I was really interested, I didn't end up buying anything there, but they had a sweater sample that was called Walk Along by Anka Strick. And that was in Color Adventures. Did I say that already? And so went back 2 or 3 times to look at that sweater. It was done as a fade, although the sweater pattern itself is not knit up that way. And I'm really tempted to knit that one up. The sample in the shop did not look as loose and baggy as the sample pictures do for this pattern. So I could see knitting it and making it just fit a little bit slimmer, but it had kind of gussets down each side and a divided hem. The back hem was a little bit longer than the front hem. It looked like a really nice, casual, comfy sweater. So that's one I'm considering knitting up in the fairly near future. I just have to figure out what yarn I'm going to knit that out of. I think it was around 1 o'clock we decided we needed a bit of a break and have something to eat and drink, so we went and sat in the cafe area, which was right next to the Knitter's Lounge. So I'll put a little footage of that in here. and then we continued to look around at all the various booths. Susan left about, I think it was about 2:15. She had quite a long bus ride back to her son's place, and of course she'd been there the day before, so she'd seen it all and then some. And so Jess and I walked around for the rest of the time. It closed, the marketplace closed at 3 o'clock. I hadn't really planned on buying anything else, but we were at Isis Fiber Arts booth, and I talking to the owner, and my eyes kept getting drawn toward this sock blank, and I just couldn't resist anymore. So there's her card, and so I went and gave in to my impulse and bought this. I think that'll be really fun to knit up. And then also it was almost over. We were kind of on our way out, and we stopped at the Sea Turtle Fiber Arts booth. And again, we're talking to the dyer there. My eyes were drawn by this line of yarn that she calls Streckles, which she said was kind of an accident when she dyed it, but then she thought it looked really neat. So here's a picture of the Streckles knit up in several colorways. And so I just kept going back to this colorway, and it's called Boo. Obviously a Halloween colorway, and I don't usually, other than I've got a few Christmas yarns, I don't feel compelled to knit, Halloween socks as a rule, but this is the one that just kept catching my eye. So I think this might be my next plain sock cast on, because this is going to be really fun to knit up. And what I forgot to mention is I did go back to Flock Fiber Studio, and I picked up these two skeins that had caught my eye. This one is called Tea Shop, or Tea Room, and this one's called Antique Shop. And they're just, I don't know if you can tell, they're sparkly, and I just loved the kind of, not pastel exactly, but kind of muted, soft shades. They just really appealed to me. So that is my Knit City haul. So I mentioned that we ran into a few people that we knew when we were at, I think, the Gauge booth. I looked over and I saw my niece Katie was there. She had come with her friend, her knitter friend, and was shopping. And so we ran into her a few times while we were walking around. And then Jess also spotted a knitting friend of hers that lives here in Chilliwack, and her mom had been a customer when I worked at the yarn shop here in town, and we got to be quite friendly there. So, and then at some point we learned, years later, after I wasn't working there anymore, I think it was after I started the podcast, she was watching, she's a member of our podcast group too, and she had mentioned that, she says, I think our daughters are friends, and sure enough they are, and their daughters are not too far apart in age, their younger daughters, so, or Jessica's younger daughter and her daughter. So anyway, that was neat. We ran into them a couple of times too, and I hadn't seen Barb for years and years, so it was great to see her again. As I mentioned before, we had the good fortune to cross paths with several people who are well known in the knitting community. Last week, Marilyn from our group had told me that Helen Stewart was going to be attending Knit City, and not as a teacher, but just as a knitter. And of all the people I knew were going to be there, she was the one person I was really hoping I'd get a chance to meet. If you've been watching this podcast for any length of time, you'll know that I've knit quite a few Helen Stewart designs in the past couple of years, and I just thought it would be a really nice opportunity to get to meet her and tell her how much I enjoy her work and admire her work. And so as it was, Susan spotted her, and so she and I went over and introduced ourselves and had a little chat. And if you've seen her on her own video podcast, or interacted with her in her Ravelry group, or seen her in any other podcast, for instance, you won't be surprised to know she's just as lovely in person as she is in those forums. So that was a really nice thing to get to meet her. And then later on, we passed a group of people and spotted Jane Richmond, the designer. And if she hadn't been talking to other people, I might have said hello. She actually used to live here in Chilliwack, and when I worked at the yarn shop, she used to come in as a customer. And I think she was one of my first friends on Ravelry. And that's a long time ago, though, probably about 10 years. And I have no idea if she would have remembered me, but it would have been nice to say hello to her. She's got her hair cut really short now. It used to be really long. And then I was really excited for Jessica too. She was wearing the Authenticity shawl by Sylvia McFadden, and she had a shawl pin that's shaped like a Stellar's J. And she got quite a few compliments on both her shawl and her shawl pin. So she was walking down one of the aisles and noticed a woman who had a sweater with the same lace motif as the shawl, and so she said something about it, and they stopped to chat for a couple minutes, and then the woman said, yeah, I love this stitch pattern. I keep trying to find an excuse to include it in my designs. And Jessica said, are you Sylvia? And she's like, yes. So she was quite thrilled to meet the designer of her shawl. Actually, I was wearing my Aurora shawl, and I got to meet the designer of that too. So that was kind of cool, actually. We were both wearing knitwear from people that were participating there. Yeah, so I guess that's about all I can tell you. We stayed right till 4 o'clock and headed home and brought our goodies home. I'm trying to think if this is only the third knitting event I've been to over the years, and I'm trying to think if I would do anything differently. I didn't have a big plan. My 3 things, I think I might have said this at the beginning. My 3 things were I wanted to visit Gage Dye Works, I wanted yarn for my time trade shawl, and I wanted to visit Yarn Inc. I've seen their yarn featured on the Grocery Girls podcast, and I did go in and I actually put together a really lovely fade set of 3 skeins. And then I'd already spent a lot of money on my yarn for the shawl and a few other things at that time, and I just couldn't bring myself to make the purchase. I liked them together, but it wasn't something I couldn't live without. So I resisted temptation. Who knows, maybe one day I'll actually purchase some through the website. That was the other goal, is to try and find or try and buy yarn that I couldn't just easily go down and buy in a yarn shop close by. I didn't want to buy any sort of well-known commercial brands like Malabrigo or Madeline Tosh. While I love them, I've purchased them many times before and can easily get my hands on them. I wanted things that were a little bit more unique and tougher to find. So I definitely succeeded in that. So I think that brings us to the end of this little recap. I hope you at least get a little taste of what it was like if you weren't able to attend yourself. I know I always enjoy hearing about these events from various podcasters like Rhinebeck or Marilyn Sheep and Wool, things like that I've never had the opportunity to attend. So I hope that just gave you a little taste. So who knows if I'll be able to go next year or not, or in the future, but I'm really happy to have been able to go this year. It definitely was a great day. So I've had quite a few projects to share with you this week. I have been somewhat of a fickle knitter, I guess. I definitely, I was working pretty, what's the word? Dedicatedly? I don't think that's the word. On a couple of projects before Knit City, and then since I came back, I've cast on a project with some yarn I purchased there, and then I also succumbed to a mystery knit along. So I'll talk about all of those. And I've been reading a little bit, so I'll talk about that. First thing I want to do is show you my blocked Tulamine Mystery Shawl by Tabitha Hedrick. I will warn you right now, it is completely finished and it's a spoiler. I'm not sure when the spoilers are supposed to come off, so as a precaution, again, look away if you don't want to see this shawl in its entirety. Okay, so here it is in all its glory, and I mean glory. I am so happy with this project. It's about 7 feet long by 2 feet wide, and it's the perfect width and length to just wrap up in. I can so see myself using this winter. It blocked out just beautifully. You can see it has like it ends in a point on each end. Just to recap, if you haven't been watching, the yarn I used is all Sweet Georgia Yarns Tough Love Sock in Mirror Pond, or no, sorry, that is called, oh shoot, where is it here? Sea Spray. Sea Spray, this was a one-of-a-kind green skein, and then this is Mirror Pond, this variegated that has shades of both the green and the teal in there. So maybe what I'll do, stand up. Oh, I just found an end I didn't trim off, but I'll show you from behind. I don't know, hopefully you can see that is the back. And then as you can see, all the striping and transitions to this ending. And as I mentioned last week, and this might be a little bit more easily visible now, instead of just doing a, you knit this row in the Mirror Pond, or in the last color, the sea, and then you're supposed to knit one row of either contrasting color I'm not sure if that's saying that right. Let's try that again. You ended off the shawl by working a garter bump in the color you were using there, the third color, and then you were supposed to knit a row and bind off with either the main color or the contrasting color one. And I chose to knit a garter bump, so 2 rows of the green, and then I knit a row and bound off with the main color, and I just had just enough. And I just love how that sort of frames the end. So it is too warm to keep this on, but oh, I just so look forward to using this shawl upcoming. Haven't been this happy about a project for a long time, as I could just really see myself using this one. So yeah, there you go. I just want to keep showing it off. All right, let's find a place. I'm just going to lean out of frame to put it over here. Get it out of my way. Okay, I was going, before Knit City, I was going great guns on my Honey Bee Dance socks by Helen Stewart from the Sock Society, or Handmade Sock Society collection. And I think when I spoke to you last, I was getting near the toe on my first sock. So I think I have about 1 pattern repeat to complete. So I did do that and did the toe. And then I cast on for the second. And I think I've just about 2 pattern repeats there. I've got a few more rows to go in the second pattern repeat. So you can see it is a lace pattern down the center of the leg and foot with some little cabling and twisted stitches, columns of twisted stitches to the side. And as I mentioned last week, I've been doing this cable wrong all along, but I am not changing it now, so I've cast on the second sock and am knitting it like I did the first one, even though it's not how the pattern says it should be. This yarn is from our local Black Cat Custom Yarns. It's quite blown out on the screen. It's a little bit deeper yellow than it is showing up, at least from what I can see in the camera. And it is their everyday sock and the champagne colorway, which was their January club color this year. So yeah, I was going great guns on those. Another pattern that I knit on quite a bit this past week. I feel like something's going to go sliding. I'll just lay it down. Is the current shawl for the Shawl Society 3 by Helen Stewart. And as you can see, it is basically an asymmetrical triangular shawl which alternates strips of or stripes of garter stitch with a mohair lace pattern. So I've completed, let's see, 1, 2, 3 stripes of each. I am using this beautiful pink silk wool blend from Alpha Bee Yarns, I think it's called. I'm just looking for the labels, see if they're here. No, I don't have them in my bag. I'm not sure where I've left them. And so it is, let's see, I know I have the notes from last year, or last week. I'm working without notes this week. I'm going to have to do them after. Yeah, Alpha Bee Yarn, Luxe Bee, Duchesse de Brabant. And again, it's a little bit darker than it's showing up on screen. And then this is Katya Silk Mohair in color 701. And you can see it is a color block type of yarn. Started with pink and it went up to a silver gray. Now it's kind of in a darker plummy gray, back to silver gray, and then some darker pink. So again, very happy with how this one is knitting up. And I worked on quite a bit this past week. I'm going to untangle it there. So there's the beginning, which you've seen. And not showing very well. Sorry, it's very airy, so it's not really showing up well. You can see the dark gray is just starting to come out in this bottom stripe. Let's see if I hold it back there, if that gives you a more complete picture. There you go. There, that might be the best way against my dark shirt. So yeah, it is coming along very nicely. I'm just on to my next stripe of garter stitch. I'm not sure when I'm going to get back to it because I have a couple other projects that are taking my attention now. So I'll show you some new socks next. And again, if you don't want to be spoiled, look away. They are the Downtown Mystery Socks by Lori Law. So look away for a few minutes if you don't want to be spoiled. I was on Ravelry the other day and I was in our group and I noticed an ad at the bottom of the page for Downtown Mystery Socks, and clicked on it and found that it was a mystery knit along by my friend Lori Law, who I used to work with here in Chilliwack at the yarn shop. And I was reading the pattern and she mentioned that these socks featured the same heel that was used in the Jangles socks, which have also been advertised at the bottom of our pages in our groups. And I'd been looking at those Jangles socks and I thought it sounded like an interesting heel, and I kept thinking I should knit them, and then something else would take my attention. So when I saw it was going to be the same heel and that it was going to be a mystery knit along, I thought it would be a good chance. It would give me the chance to just kind of knit some socks without a lot of pressure to get them finished, because the clues will come in small bites, so I could kind of gradually work on them. So I've decided to knit the 72 stitch size for my husband for Christmas, and I'm using the Cyborgs Craft Room, a Sockolate in the color Stepping Stones. Now my understanding is that this dyer sadly and suddenly passed away, I think a couple of years ago. This is the only skein of her yarn that I have or had, so sort of mindful of that as I knit with it. So this is the yarn. This is just my husband's type of yarn. He prefers basically blues and browns for his socks, kind of denim-y. He mostly wears them with jeans. So I had bought this colorway with him in mind. So here comes the sock. So again, look away if you don't want to see. I have one sock done with the ribbing and then one repeat of the first pattern. It's a textural pattern of knits and pearls, and I'm not sure how well it's showing up on camera. It's kind of a subtle, it's almost like a checked pattern. And I have this stitch marker on there to tell me this is sock number 1, so that as I work through sock number 1 and sock number 2, which I have cast on and done the ribbing for, I'll know which, I'll kind of work this for a while and I'll put it down, and then I'll work this one and check off my rows as I go. So that'll be my way of keeping track of which sock I cast on first, so that I make sure they end up the same length before I work the heel. So the first clue is to basically work this stitch pattern on the leg, I think it was 5 times. So I'm 1/5 way through on this sock, and obviously I haven't started the stitch pattern on this one. So far I like it. It's again one of those patterns that is keeps your interest but is simple, and that's the kind of thing I like to do. I can't just knit a yarn like this just plain for my husband, or I would die of boredom. So this gives me a little bit of interest as I knit his socks. In general, I don't really like knitting men's socks, I guess because it's more stitches and it seems to take longer, and they're never quite as exciting as women's socks in color and in pattern as a rule. But I do like to knit him socks, and he does wear them all the time, so it's worth doing it. So that brings me to my final project, and if you watched the Knit City portion of the podcast, it will come as no surprise to you to learn that I cast on Time Trades by Caitlin Hunter. In the Knit City portion, I showed you the yarn that I had bought for it, and I'll just, if you didn't watch that, I'll refresh your memory. So the pattern calls for 5 mini skeins in a gradient, and then 2 full-size skeins that all coordinate. And this was my favorite purchase from Knit City, so I'm just going to dig things out of the bag I have here. Alright, get all my info. So I bought mini skein set. The fact that some are little balls tells you I've been knitting. So this is Midknit Cravings Yarn Company in their Sweet Sock. Let's see if that, you can see the light shining on that. I just dropped yarn. Sweet Sock, it is 80% superwash merino and 20% nylon. And where did that ball of yarn go? Oh, darn. No idea. Oh, there it is. 1 sec. Getting a really early polished podcast today, guys. This color is called Velvet Plum. This is Wine Not, as in drinking wine, which I think is a great sentiment. And then this is Kelp Forest, I think. Yes, Kelp Forest. Followed by, oh, where'd it go? I don't know where the other label is. I will, oh, here it is. Smoke and Mirrors, that's right, Smoke and Mirrors. And then Tapas Bar. So that's what I spotted first at Knit City and loved the way they looked. And then I bought this skein called Amethyst Brooch and this skein called Solomon's Robe. And these are my main color 1 and main color 2. So why don't I show you what I've knit so far. It's basically, it's a rectangular shawl, but it's knit in such a way that the sides knit up on an angle. So like this. So this kind of, the stripes will go diagonally across the shawl. And as you can see, it's a feather and fan design. I'm going to put a picture in here. I know I did it in the Knit City portion, but I'm going to put a picture in here of the sample photo so you can get a really good sense of what it looks like. I didn't want to print it off. It was just, I don't have a ton of ink, and it just seemed like would really, really eat the ink. So I just, if I ever want to look at it, I just go onto the computer and look. But you can see what I've done is I've knit from here to here, just these garter stitches here. That is one repeat, and you alternate the contrast color 1 and contrast color 2. And then for the second repeat, you do 5 repeats. Second repeat, you alternate contrast color 2 with contrast color 3. And then you alternate contrast color 3 with contrast color 4, and so on until the last set of 5 repeats is contrast color 5 with the main color 1. And then the main color 1 and 2 are used for the rest of the shawl in a different kind of sequence and different patterns. So I really wrestled with what order to put some of the yarns in, and what I actually did, I should have taken a picture, and I didn't. I actually first used this color as my contrast color 3, and then the green as my contrast color 4. And then as I was starting to knit the contrast color 4, I had second thoughts, and I ripped back to this point and knit the green in, and I'm going to proceed that way. So again, just dropped on the floor, but I actually have a little ball. So my next colors are going to be the green, then this gray, and then this lighter gray. And I just felt like, even though definitely they're not exactly a gradient in that all the colors are not you know, dark to light shades of this, I just felt like visually it would go from sort of the darkest to the lightest before it hit the main color. And I just felt better about that because that was sort of the intention of the shawl, and I just felt like I wanted to stay more true to that. So while in black and white, because I tried, these two actually are basically indistinguishable because they're so close in tone. I just felt like I wanted to switch them up. So anyway, I don't want to knit anything else. This is all I want to knit right now. I think a lot of it, you know, you kind of think about it sometimes, like why is it that certain patterns just grab and then hold your attention? And I don't know for sure, but I think part of what I like about this is the color changing for sure, and wanting to see how the yarns play off each other as I knit it up. Another factor is that it's mostly just knit and purl rows. Every fourth row in this section and this section is the feather and fan lace row that creates this scallop look. But once you get on a rhythm with that, it flows really easily. And so again, I guess it's just that perfect combination of simple enough to be enjoyable, but complex enough to, or sorry, simple enough to knit without a lot of thought, but complex enough to be enjoyable. So loving this. And as I mentioned in the Knit City part, I had seen this on the Suburban Stitcher podcast. Diane was knitting this and talking about how that's all she wanted to knit, and I totally get why. As for up and coming, I went ahead and wound up this skein of yarn from Sea Turtle Fiber Arts in the, it's called Ridley Sock in the Streckles patterning, self-patterning, and it is in the colorway Boo, which was a Knit City acquisition. So I haven't cast them on yet. I wound this up yesterday and I went looking for needles and found that I don't really have any that are free at the moment. Well, I do have some Knit Picks ones, which are what I'll probably end up doing. I've gotten away from using the Knit Picks sock needles just because I'm finding as they're older, the cords are not as flexible. They tend to stay in, they're just stiffer than they used to be. But I'm kind of desperate. So I think it's what I'm going to do is cast them on. And because I haven't had a plain sock on the needles for a long time, and I am kind of anxious to see how this stuff starts knitting up. The colors are so fun. And they are Halloween, so maybe, just maybe, I'll get them done by then. You know, I don't even know why I'm thinking about even another project. I have so much going on right now. I really don't have any good excuse for casting on more things, but those will fit a niche of what I need. And then the other thing that is up and coming is the latest sock in the Handmade Sock Society, which are the hazelnut socks. Not the best copy. I just ran this off on the printer, but as I mentioned, I'm running out of some ink, so that's not the best photocopy. And I don't know if you can tell, but there's like little stripes running across it where the ink's missing, and I can see the actual printing on it is quite pale, so I might have to do that again. But there you go, gives you an idea. They're again a very what I would say is a very Helen Stewart like sock, in that they, again, nice blend of simple, but with some interesting design element going on. In this case, down either side of each sock. Haven't even begun to think about yarn, but am looking forward to going through the stash and finding just the perfect thing. I've been reading somewhat, mostly in the evenings. I finished The Long Winter by Laura Ingalls Wilder. I know I talked a fair bit about this book last week. It's just a really amazing, really, when you realize how isolated this town was during that for so many months and supplies not coming in. One of the, not sure what the right word is, trying to bring it back out of English class, but near the end of the story, her future husband and a friend of his go on quite a precarious trip out of town, looking for someone who supposedly, wasn't even sure about it, had supposedly had a lot of seed wheat that he had harvested the previous fall, and they went on this search for it and found it and brought it back, and that kept the in large part kept a lot of the townspeople from starving, including Laura's family. I remember having this thought before, and I definitely had it again. And Laura's husband, Almanzo, had his own stash of seed wheat. And at some point, Pa goes over to his brother's store, not Pa's brother's store, but Almanzo's brother's store. He and his brother are living in his brother's store in town for the winter, not out on their claim. And Almanzo has hidden his seed wheat behind a false wall in the building because he doesn't want people to know he has it, because he selfishly, I guess, really wants to keep it to sow for his crop in the spring, because he's unsure whether the town will get seed wheat, and he's grown this himself and he knows the quality of it. And so at one point, Pa does come over, and Almanzo does give him some wheat to take home to feed his family. And now, in the justification for him and the other young man that go out looking for the seed wheat south of town that may or may not exist, his justification is that his wouldn't be enough. He doesn't have enough that would feed everyone anyway, so they'd still be in trouble. But I always find it interesting that he's a hero because he made the dangerous trip, and as they were heading back, a blizzard did strike, and for several days people didn't even know if they had made it back or not safely. But it's, I don't know, they entice this man to give up his seed wheat. One of the shopkeepers has given them money to buy the wheat. And yet at the same time, he stashed his own, which gave him a step up in the spring. Now, in all fairness, they did not deplete this man of all of his seed wheat, but still, I always find that a bit of a, I can't think of how to put it, just it's sort of a, okay, you did this, that's great, but you weren't willing to give up your own wheat to feed your neighbors. So it's a little bit of a touch and go situation there. Then I moved on to Little Town on the Prairie, which basically opens just after the long winter concludes. It's spring, families back on their claim shanty and planting crops. And Laura's father asked her, how would you like to work in town? So as I'm reading, she's just completed her first day working at a dry goods store in town, sewing shirts. And it's a long day, and they have like one break to have dinner. And she talks about how her neck and back are aching at the end of the day. She bastes shirts together and does buttonholes, and the shopkeeper's mother-in-law sews them up on the machine. So it's not what, we can whip through a project pretty easily on a sewing machine these days, and we just use pins, pin everything together. But I read this and I think, I would just, it's all the part of sewing I don't like to do. And Laura did not really enjoy sewing, and yet she was willing to do this kind of work in the hopes of earning some money to send her sister to the College for the Blind. Her sister Mary had become blind several years before, and this was a dream of the family's to be able to send her away to get the education she'd always hoped for. So definitely doing it for the good of others. So this is another one of my favorite books in the series. So I'm enjoying revisiting that. I'll have to try and remember show you next time. When I was in De Smet, I bought a Christmas ornament with one of the illustrations from, I think it's from this book. If not, it's from the next one. they had the illustration on and then they colored them in. It's really pretty. So I'll show that to you next week. Anyway, enjoying that. And then like I've done with the other ones, I'm going to read the pertinent sections of Pioneer Girl when I'm finished with this. This week, well, the highlight was Knit City, hands down for sure. We spent Saturday doing a lot of little jobs around the house, some errands to run, and just jobs to do to kind of get ready for fall and winter around here. So we put away quite a lot of our outdoor furniture. We just left underneath, on the new deck, underneath the old deck where it's covered, we just left out a couple of chairs and tables and the fire table. And so we are looking forward to using that in the cold weather too. And we're really hoping we get a chance next time when it snows to go in. We think it would be cool to sit under there while it snows. So we'll see how practical that ends up being. Definitely in the evenings now when we use that area, we have blankets that we put on around ourselves to keep warm. So, but it's just kind of something we're hoping to get use out of over the fall and winter too. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. No, nothing that stands out. I am hoping to podcast one more time before we go away next Saturday on our trip to Europe. Cameron just forwarded the email today that he got from work that has the itinerary on it. And looks like we have some really cool excursions ahead of us. And some dinners. There's actually planned, the last night we were in Venice, we were having dinner at some castle that apparently Wagner lived out the rest of his life in. So I can't remember what it's called, but that sounds very fascinating. So I'm anxious to see. That sounds pretty cool, doesn't it? So yeah, just now it's really starting to sound or feel real. Been kind of going through clothes and deciding what to take. And I've kind of got my evening clothes worked out. It's my daytime clothes that I have to kind of take a really good look at weather forecasts and get a sense of just how warm or how cool it will be. A friend of mine was saying that she was in Venice at this time of year and it poured rain and it was really cold and she wished she had warmer clothes. So I might have to tuck some long pants and a light jacket into my suitcase. But I think most of the time it'll be sort of like our spring weather, spring flowing into summer kind of weather here. Maybe mid-20s, low to mid-20s. So I think capris and t-shirts and sundresses and stuff would probably be fine for the day. So we'll see. So yeah, I don't know when I'm going to get all that done. I've got to put the knitting down for one thing. Been really bad about procrastinating. I don't enjoy packing, and yet I know it has to get done. As I mentioned too, we're having our family over on Sunday for Thanksgiving dinner, and so I definitely have some grocery shopping and some house tidying, house cleaning to do before that happens. So I can see what the rest of my week is kind of made up of, or what it'll include. But I do hope to record one more time before I go away. Maybe Wednesday. I'll see how things work out. On that note, I will say goodbye. Thank you for watching as always, and thanks to all of you who've reached out again this week. Always really love hearing from you. Appreciate that you take the time to reach out to me. So take care. I hope the weather's great where you are too. It's just, like I said, not a cloud in the sky today. It's so beautiful. Take care, and I'll see you soon.